Welcome, welcome. So this is a quick Blender interface tour, and you guys should already be a little bit familiar with this. I just wanted to make sure that before I get too far into the tutorial set, I'm just going to show all of the different bells and whistles that you might want to use. I'm actually in Blender 3.0 beta. This is available for free in the same website you'd find version 2.93. I think 7 is the official release that's up to date, but Blender 3 is great because it renders just slightly faster, and it actually has a few more things under the hood that you can use, but other than that, the interface is exactly the same. So even if you're on Blender 2.93, this should still be pretty much the same. All I've done here is open. You can see I have a few recent files here, but really we're just going to start with a general kind of default scene. And you can just click off of this if you want even, or you can pick one of these presets. But I'm just going to click off and we are now in the interface. So I'm just going to start by going over the navigation. As with every 3D software, of course, you're going to move slightly different in this one. You got to get your Blender legs, like your C legs, ready to go. But thankfully it's pretty simple here. To swing the camera around, you want to middle click. And I'm just holding the middle click button, and you can just drag the camera around. This kind of movement is going to be much more similar to, say, Rhino than it is Unreal Engine. While in Unreal you usually occupy the camera and fly around, here it's very much going to be like a more controlled camera distant position generally. I'm just using the middle mouse to swing around. If you scroll out, you zoom out. Scroll in, you zoom in. And that's most of the camera navigation. The other controls that are super useful though are if you hold shift and middle click, you can pull the camera to a new location. Middle click rotates, shift pull relocates. And if you press control and push in and pull out, it's a zoom as well. So between all those things, you should be good to navigate. If you ever need to reset your kind of camera position, you can go to view, and I usually just click either, if you say frame selected, it will just move your camera to what you have selected, and that is super duper handy. So now it's reset my camera here, which is really useful if you've moved way off to the side. Once you have the navigation ready, we're just going to try moving an object around. And you guys again should already have a sense of this, but the easiest way to get into the move mode is go up here and click this icon on the right. If this menu is hidden, you press the T key and it hides and reveals this toolbar. So I'm just pressing T on the keyboard. Of course, this is super useful. Pretty standard gumball. I usually like to use these planes to move, so you actually move 2 axes at once. It's really nice and quick and easy. To go to rotate mode, you can click this one, and again, pretty standard gumball stuff, and scale is here. And if you do the middle option, it does the whole object at once, but again, these specific ones will do a singular axis. I'm going to undo that though. Actually, let's rotate it again, because I think this is actually a great time to show. Just like Unreal, you have a toggle for global coordinates or local coordinates. Here you'll see that the gumball is still moving perfectly in the X, Y, and Z direction, and that is actually established up here at the top middle. If I swap from global to local, now the gumball is more lined up with the object itself, so that can be super handy, and these kind of movement controls are going to be essential for what we're doing. So you might just be swapping between local and global quite often. But there are some really handy keyboard shortcuts actually that will help you enter into these different modes without having to click these buttons. In particular, so S is the scale tool. So if you have an object selected and you press the S key, you immediately enter into scale mode. R is rotate mode. And if you press the G key, the object will follow your mouse. And all of these are cool, but they pick the middle option on the gumball. It's a little bit limited, right? So if you press S, for example, you can't scale in only one direction. You have to scale the whole object at once. So if you want to scale one specific direction, let's say we'll go to local coordinates, and we want to scale it just this direction, you probably want to activate this particular scale tool. The next thing I'm just going to mention really briefly here is up here in the top left. I'm not going to talk about all the buttons, but this is an important one to know where it is. This is where you swap between object mode, edit mode, and sculpt mode. Again, hopefully this is nothing new to you. And then I'm just going to jump all the way across the viewport here to the top right, and this is some of the gizmo toggles, and then these are the view mode controls. These are really handy just depending on how you're capturing, but if you click this button on the left, it hides the gizmos. So if you ever lose the gumball, it's most likely because you have accidentally hit this hotkey or turned off the gizmo controls. So if like you're clicking an object and your gumball isn't showing up, you might want to just click that. This icon next to this is the show overlays, and this will hide all of the objects. This is like entering game mode in Unreal Engine, for example. But this stuff will not appear in rendering though, so I usually just leave it on. It's pretty handy. This mode that's next is the X-ray mode, which is like a ghosted mode, pretty handy. And it overlays on top of the other view modes. So it's a little bit different because the rest of them are mutually exclusive. So you can go to wireframe, and then you can toggle X-ray on and off. In the same way, you can go to shaded, toggle X-ray on and off. And this is the slightly different. So the viewport shading here is a default gray wash, essentially. You can go and customize this color for basic objects, but it just starts as a gray. But if you pick this one, it will show the materials on the objects. So you see this one actually turn white because the lack of a material in Blender is a slightly gray white. But then if you swap here to the final one, you go to the rendered mode. And here you'll see that there is actually, by default, a light populating the scene and a camera. Yeah, in every new Blender scene, you're going to start with a cube, a light, and a camera. Sometimes you'll want to delete these things, and I think for demo purposes, I'll just leave these in for now. I will delete them, though, before too long. Last little bit in this central region I'm going to mention is this little toolbar over here on the right. Above this, again, there's more like gumball controls, which is pretty handy if you're on a trackpad, but I really recommend using a mouse. But this little icon set down here, if you press the N key on the keyboard, you pull this out, and it has some additional controls for things you might have selected, so you can really precisely control the scale numbers, location numbers, and rotations here, the tools that you have activated, and the view. And out of these, one of the really handy controls is the camera to view, which actually does put your camera perspective, your view perspective, in the camera. So if you move the view, it moves the camera, much like Unreal Engine. So this can be super handy once you're getting to the rendering phase, so we'll be pulling into this later for sure. But you can just know that if this is out in your workspace and it's in your way, if you press the N key, it will hide that or open it. So that's all of the main highlights for this main view mode, and I'll just go back to the default viewport shading. I think there's lots of other little bells and whistles that you can activate in here, but those are the bare bones essentials. At the top, of course, you have your standard file, edit tabs, etc. But then these tabs up here, I'm not really going to get into these very much. I pretty much just stick in the default layout tab, but they actually have some pre-organized workspaces for you. So if you go to the modeling tab, it has isolated purely the modeling tool sets, and it actually has expanded this tool list you'll see on the left. Sculpting, again, customizes all your windows for sculpting specifically. UV editing, again, just customizes it, pulls your UV editor right here to the side. Texture painting, if you want to do painting in Blender, this is a really cool workspace to do that. Shading, which is material work. You can see it has pulled this window down here, which is like very similar to the Unreal Engine material nodes, and then you have your previews, and it even gives you a folder system here because you might want to be pulling in texture files. And then they have animation, rendering, and you can even do compositing in Blender, which is really cool. And then one of the more recent additions is geometry nodes, which is the Blender equivalent of Grasshopper. And then depending on how deep you want to go, they even have Python scripting directly into Blender. But you don't need to know any of that. Like I said, I literally use the default layout for 99.9% of my stuff because you can actually just customize it. Any one of these little corner windows, if you press the button here, you can actually just pick it to be something else. And this goes even for the main viewport. So a 3D viewport is exactly what it says, but it could become any one of these different windows if you want. And of course you can just drag them up and down. If you really want to get into that and customize stuff about your window, you can actually drag from the corner by clicking where you see this plus icon, and you'll pull a new window out, which then you could turn into whatever you want it to be. You can have some fun with that. I won't be getting too much into that though. If you want to close the extra window, what you can do is when your mouse is in between the two zones that you've created, if you right click, you can just join the areas and you get to pick which one it joins to. Over here in the top, you actually have your scene collection. This is very much like the world outliner in Unreal Engine. It's pretty much just a list of all the stuff in your scene. You can hide and show things by clicking the eye icon, and this will hide it in the viewport, and then if you click the camera, it hides it in the render. Really handily, you can make these things called collections, which kind of operate like folders. If you were to move your cube into the second collection and you turn off that collection, now you have hidden the cube or anything else that is included in that list. Again, really handy to just help you quickly navigate through your scene. Down below that though, you have your details panel, much like in Unreal Engine again. It goes from universal properties up at the top down into object-specific properties down below. And I'm just going to hit a couple of highlights on this that we will be touching on in this series. Of course, the top one here is your render settings. We'll get more specifically into this once we get to the rendering video. In the same way, we will be talking more about the output settings when we get to that video as well. And these kind of go hand in hand. The next one that's really important is the World tab, and this lets you change things like the background color or add in an HDRI or skybox into the scene, depending on what you're doing. This is the transform controls, so very much like when you press the N key and you pull out the side window, this is duplicated right here. And so you can control really specific information about your object. Below that is the Holy Grail. This is the Modifiers tab. This is where things start to get a little spicy in Blender. You can add all sorts of cool modifiers, and I'll be showing some of those later on. This next tab is the Particles tab. And again, I'll show another video about particles specifically, but to use it, you can just add a particle system and add emitters or hair. And you can already see what that's doing over here. To get rid of it, you can just hit the minus key. Here is the Physics tab, and you'll see that Blender has a lot of really interesting physics sets that you could play around with. And I might show a little bit of this, but I'll stay pretty light on it because each one of these is probably worth your own exploration and self-discovery. I'll leave that up to you. And the last tab I'm going to be covering, the last two tabs I should say, are the Materials tab, which may look intimidating at first, but we'll get into that and it's actually really easy to use. And then the Texture tab, which is where you can just load in all of your different textures directly into Blender, which is really cool. So yeah, that's the essentials. And you'll notice here at the bottom I have left this timeline workspace. I'm not going to be using it for animation. It's just interesting that it's here by default. I will probably be just changing this to other things as I might need them, specifically the shader editor, because it just pulls out a little bit more information for the material stuff right here for you, but really we don't actually need this, so I could close it, I suppose, but I usually like to just leave it so I have it quickly there. But that's the tour, and now we're just going to jump straight into using Blender.